Hi, I'm Brandon Bowers, pastor of New Life Church, located in Locust, North Carolina. And I wanted to say thanks for stopping by and checking out our YouTube channel. I hope that today's message is both encouraging and challenging to you and your walk with Christ. If you're in our area sometime, we would love to have you come check out one of our services, each and every Sunday at 8:45, 10:15, and 11:45. We'd love to have you come out. And I hope that you enjoy today's message.
Morning, everybody. Hey, give it up one more time for the worship team, man. They work hard all week, show up 3 times every Sunday. So glad to see you all survived your Thanksgiving. Some of you, all you did was eat, and some of you braved Black Friday. We're glad to see nobody's on crutches or in cast or anything. You all survived unscathed. Thrilled you could make it out this morning for the conclusion of our True Religion series. Brandon's given me the opportunity to elaborate on and spend a little bit of time with you this morning. And I think we've been in James 1:27, so that's where we're gonna jump off from again this morning. So if you want to go ahead and turn there, we'll be there in a minute. But we've really dissected this verse, and in the first week of the series, we spent a lot of time discussing our obligations to help others and meet them in their needs, and the fact that we've been blessed with the ability to do so, whether it's right outside our doors or across an ocean, and how that really reflects as part of true, authentic Christianity. And then Pastor Brandon spent a couple weeks really analyzing what that means and talking about what a true, honest relationship and a true religion and a true Christian faith really looks like. So we've really covered those sections of the verse really well. And so I want to spend a little bit of time on the last part of that verse. And it's probably something we're very familiar with in light of Thanksgiving passing, because I know that you guys all spilled something either on your shirt or your pants or a tablecloth this weekend. It happened. Whether that was sweet potatoes or mashed potatoes and gravy or turkey, whatever that may be, and it left a spot. All right, and so I want to talk this morning about stains. Now, I really hate stains because the thing about a stain is it always happens at the least beneficial time. It's never when you're on your way home from work, right? The coffee always spills on your way to work, most of the time on your favorite shirt. And it's never just a little bit, like the whole lid comes off, right? You're just wearing a big streak down the middle of your shirt. And if you're fast enough, you can usually get most of it out. But there's always going to be at least just a little bit of evidence that it was there. In fact, last Sunday I wore one of my favorite shirts. I hadn't worn it all year, and Dennis Parker walks up and goes, "You got a stain right there on your shirt." It hadn't even been out of the closet all year, and there's a stain, a little faded stain right here on my shirt. And the crazy thing about a stain is you can look at a stain and you can tell it wasn't originally part of the item. But somehow that stain, it doesn't just pull on the surface. It works down into the core structure of whatever item it happens to land on. It becomes so a part of it that even though you can see that they were never meant to be the same item, you can practically never separate them again. It gets down into the foundation, and it ruins a lot of things. So that's why I hate stains. Now obviously, you didn't come to hear a lecture on laundry, which, by the way, is my least favorite household chore. I hate laundry. It never ends. But I feel like a stain on our shirt is a good representation of what can happen in our lives. That there are things that we spill that work into the inner core, the inner fabric of who we are, that even tint our soul and our hearts to the point that it's almost impossible to get them back out. That we may not even see, that other people may have to point out around us. And so that's what we're going to do this morning. I just want to spend a few moments talking about not stains on our clothes, but stains in our lives. And where that leads us and what that looks like and why it's so dangerous. And so James 1:27 says, "Religion that is pure and undefiled before God the Father is this, to visit orphans and widows in their affliction, and to keep oneself unstained from the world. Now, we've got an up-road battle to start out. I just want to make this very clear because the Bible tells us we're all stained. We're all sinners from the beginning. And so it's not even like we're working off of a blank slate. You're already behind the 8 ball, so to speak. And God's very clear. He says, in order to get to the point where you have a blank slate, where there's even a blank slate to work from, that nature has to be changed. And the only way to do that is through the acceptance of Jesus Christ as your Savior. You accept that He died on the cross for your sins and rose 3 days later. That's how you even get to the part where we can have this conversation about a blank slate. Period. So if that's not you, I want to encourage you to take that first step this morning as we head into this conversation. And so we see this concept of stained. Now, when we talked about stain earlier, it was an offending thing on the exterior. It wasn't something that really necessarily prevented you from being around other people. But if you begin to look and talk about the context and the words that are used in the original Greek language, the idea of stained here is not something that you've spilled. It's a concept that is toxic. And it connects back to a Jewish concept where you would have been ceremoniously unclean, meaning you would have touched a dead body or you had leprosy, something to that effect. Something where you were no longer fit to interact with other people because you might contaminate them. So it's a much bigger issue than a little bit of a laundry problem. It's a much bigger problem that we're talking about. And I stepped back as I was going through this and doing research, and I said, the reality is that we're all stained. I look at myself and I'm like, man, I got this and that. And so I think what I want to do this morning is work backwards, because I want to analyze where that staining leads us. Because I feel like we can take a step back and look at our world and look at our church and look at ourselves and see the results very clearly. And so I feel like if we see the results, we can work backwards and say, well, I don't want to be there. So what do I have to do not to be there? So that's going to bring us to our first point. We have to realize that we're all stained products. At the end of the day, James is sort of like throwing you in a white robe and telling you to run a barefoot foot race through a pigsty and asking you to come out clean on the other side. It's practically impossible. It's just not something that you or I can do feasibly. It just doesn't happen that way. But I think that this same staining is what has created some of the culture crisis around us today, both inside and outside our churches. Now, I need to explain, I'm going to talk a lot about culture. I'm going to say a lot about world. I need you to understand that when I say that, I'm not talking necessarily about what's outside these doors, because I believe that's just a manifestation of the biblical concept of world. When I say world, when I say culture, what I'm talking about is a perspective, a view where we have decided to selfishly focus on our own selves rather than a true Christian nature. It's one that says, I should take care of me first. It's one that says, well, there's no absolute truth. It's the motivating factors behind what has created the culture that we live in. So we need to understand that it's more than just boycotting Starbucks because they support gay marriage. It's more than that. All right, so now that we've got that out of the way, my concern with stains is twofold, really. And the bigger one is the fact not only that we accept them as okay, but rather that we chase them in our own lives. There are things that have become so accepted and stains that we actually seek them out. And what happens is Luke 9:25 says, what good is it for a man to gain the world and lose his soul? What happens is you become fake. You are no longer you, and I'm no longer me. It leads to a church full of hypocrites. And I've always told people who say, well, the church is just full of hypocrites. Well, one more? Just come join us. Right? I mean, I saw a young lady wearing a shirt in first service that said, no perfect people allowed. That's just the reality of the church because we're all broken. But my fear is that we have become a culture, a church that we put forth a checklist so we appear religious rather than actually being religious. It amazes me, I think if people would take the amount of effort that they put into looking like they're religious, into actually being religious, into a relationship with Christ, you guys would be like a bunch of spiritual Navy SEALs out here. Right? Does that never cross anybody's mind that we work so hard at appearing religious? If we just worked half that hard at actually being religious and actually having that relationship, this would take care of this. It's like building a house and putting up the sheetrock before you run the plumbing and the electrical. It's just stupid. And I'm guilty of it. And that's where it leads us. And what we've done is we've traded freedom, we've traded power, and we've traded grace for exhaustion, for slavery, and for immorality. And sometimes we don't even see it. We don't even realize, because what has happened is that the American definition of culture has become an American definition of Christianity. I'm afraid that there's such thing as an American Christianity and a true Christianity. Because what happens, we see people come in the church and we have this idea that the church is there to cater to us just like any other business in our culture. We have a church where people are focused on themselves, where people aren't generous, where people don't give. You can't get them to give for finances, for time, for talents, or even to say a prayer. It gets to the point that people show up once every other month and they expect a group of staff and a small group of overworked volunteers to cater to their every needs, down to what color the bathroom is. And that's our concerns. And it's alarming because the church has become so stained that my generation and the generation following has decided it's just too exhausting. Why would I want that? Why would I want to be fake? Why don't I just be me? I see my parents running themselves crazy trying to present a face that's not even them. And that's where stains lead us. That's where an acceptance and a chasing of culture leads us, both on an individual level and an organizational level at your churches, at our church. And it all leads us to a fact where we even have to have a conversation and a series called True Religion. Because we can't simply say, well, look to this person, look how they're doing it. That's what Christianity looks like. Because those people are so few and far between. And we don't even recognize it. And see, what happens is, with all of this, we get to a point where we begin to exchange the new things for what we know to be true. We throw out truth simply because somebody tells us it's new, and because our society tells us, well, new is automatically better. So I should just get rid of what I once knew to be true and accept this. And see, obviously the first step here is you have to actually know what is true. Like if you don't know what is true, you don't know what to check it against. And to me, that's maybe the biggest problem. People today don't know what's true. They don't know what and where to get their information from. Which 2 Timothy very clearly tells us, all Scripture is good for teaching. He's saying the Bible, that God's way, that's truth. You want the standard? That is the standard. That's what you check everything against. And he also tells us days will come where people are going to trade the truth for unsound doctrine. And it's not just in the church. I'm not just beating up on us, because the world does it too. In fact, I got a great video I want to share with you. Jimmy Kimmel did a thing with the new iPhone, the iPhone 6S Plus minus whatever's coming out. And they went out on the streets and did a little demo with people, but there was a little twist, so check it out.
Did you watch Apple's big announcement yesterday? Right. You know, then there's a new Apple TV, a supersized iPad, and 2 new iPhones on the way, which is kind of crazy because the last iPhone came out less than a year ago. But we're now programmed to feel like if we don't get the new one, we're missing out on something. So today, we went on the street and asked people to try out the new iPhone and tell us what they think. Now, even though they announced it yesterday, the new iPhone won't even come out until later this month. So what we did was we gave people the oldest iPhone, the original first-generation iPhone that came out in 2007, and told them it was the new iPhone, and, well, here's what they thought of it.
We're out here talking to people because Apple held a conference where they announced their newest iPhone and a couple of the other new products. We actually have a test device here. We wanted to see if we can maybe get your opinion on it.
Awesome.
Check it out.
Oh, cool. Nice and light. Small. Fits in the palm of my hand. Quite nifty. I like it.
It's actually quite comfortable. Better than before. My thumb doesn't have to stretch all the way across the country to type.
What's some of the new features they have on this one?
It's got like a higher resolution screen and a much better quality camera.
Okay.
So just walk us through what you're seeing as you use the phone.
I'm seeing a smaller screen, probably more compact for somebody who don't want to drop their phone a lot.
Calendar just opened up so perfectly.
Did it open up faster than it did on your previous phone?
Much faster, yes. It's actually very exciting.
It's pretty cool. I like how fast the processor is moving.
Yeah.
It's not lagging and it's not holding me up.
The resolution on the screen itself is much sharper.
Yes,
All
absolutely.
right, definitely.
Pictures are clear and the camera is amazing.
What do you think of the two phones side by side? You have your 6 out here as well.
Yeah, I think this is daintier. It seems like the same weight, even though it's distributed differently.
And what about the size and feel of the phone?
I love the size. It's not too big. It just fits so perfectly in the palm of my hand, easily to slip into my handbag as well.
Yeah.
Easy to find.
Are you going to consider purchasing this phone when it goes on sale in 2 weeks?
Probably.
Yeah?
Yeah, probably.
Because it's better than ever before?
You gotta have it. Gotta always have the new one.
You think Apple's done it again?
Apple always does it again.
Would you say this is a worthy addition to the iPhone lineup?
Absolutely.
A thoroughly modern new iPhone.
Thoroughly modern. Absolutely.
Finally, we have an iPhone for 2015.
Yes. Absolutely. I can't wait to get mine.
For the phone itself, it's going to cost $800 out of the box, or it's free if you have the first iPhone.
Okay, that's cool.
Yeah.
Wow, Apple does care about their customers, regardless of what people say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Apple, you've done it again.
So that seems ridiculous to us, right? Raving about 10-year-old technology. And it's funny when we're watching a video of it, but it's scary when it happens in our own lives. Because what seems ridiculous up there is what we do every day as a culture, as a people, sometimes as a church. See, we take experts, so-called experts, who actually have no clue what they're talking about, and they just throw out some big words and they say it nice and eloquent, and we assume that must be true then. It sounds good, right? But that's not the way this works. It's the way the world says it works. And the thing is, just let me give you some examples. For instance, divorce. The world says divorce is okay, and the rate in the church is the same as the rate outside the church. And I realize I'm stepping on people's toes, but the reality is, it used to be you could at least say, well, at least pastors aren't getting divorced. The rate among pastors has risen to the point where it's almost identical to those things. And this is coming from a guy whose parents divorced and married one another, so I get it's a reality. The problem is it's something that's become acceptable as a solution to any and all problems. Yeah, you're fighting about something, well, get a divorce. Finances aren't working out, well, get a divorce. That's the best way to go about it. It's become something that's so acceptable that we don't even recognize it as a stain anymore. It's something we chase down as a good thing. Or maybe we can even talk about the hookup culture that exists in America today, where one-night stands are acceptable. And as part of moving your relationship along, well, you should move in together before you get married so you can see if things will work out. And we've forgotten along the way that sex is not an activity just for fun. Sex is not something that you use as a rite of passage into adulthood, but it's a consummation of a lifelong commitment. And I'm wondering if the divorce rate isn't directly connected to that, or hasn't directly produced that. See, and these are things that we view as acceptable. Things that we see within the church as much as we see outside the church. Maybe even things you see in your own life. I mean, we could go for days just talking about that. And I guess what I want to put forth is that when it comes to truth, just because you may not like the idea of it doesn't make it any less true. I had a class at Gardner-Webb, and it was half science majors and half religion majors. It was an interesting semester, and we had this conversation a lot. And a lot of times it started out with, well, I don't like the idea that God. Well, I'm here to tell you that God can do whatever he wants, and just because you don't like the idea doesn't make it less true. And so this is the life, this is the culture that stains lead us to. It's the end goal. We end up with a culture that looks like it does, and a church that looks like it does, and a personal life that looks the way that they do. Now, I hope at this point you're a little bit on edge, and I hope you're saying, how do I know if this is where I'm headed? How do I know if I'm already here? All right, because we can't fix culture and we can't fix the church without first working on ourselves. So I want to do a little checkup here in the next couple of minutes and talk about some symptoms, some stained symptoms that I see that can be used as red flags in your life. Some things that say, hey, maybe we need to take a step back, take a look at this, and work on getting some of that out, getting some of that taken care of. And the reality is that we're going to see at the end of sort of talking about these symptoms is they're far and wide. They're vast. And we'll never be able to cover all of them on one Sunday morning. So just keep that in mind as we hit a few of the high notes. The first of those, I think, James hits it a little bit earlier in his passage here, as well as other places in the Bible, is the tongue. Now, culture in America, we have this weird concept that as you grow up and get older, your vocabulary should mature and the things you talk about should mature. And I would agree with that statement, but I think their definition of what is mature is wrong. And a lot of times we put a lot more weight on actions in our culture, what people do, and I think that indicates a lot, but we forget the fact that the Bible clearly says that your tongue is a direct reflection of your heart. What you say, the way you say it, and the things you talk about is directly reflects what's in here, what's at the core of your very being, who you actually are. It's interesting, in World War II, resistance fighters, they used to, they'd find a downed pilot or a lost soldier, and so they would want to take them in, obviously, to help their resistance, and sometimes to smuggle them back to wherever they needed to be as far as their armies. And so they would collect this person, and then obviously they were on guard. They would surround them and walk wherever they were going. And at some point during their walk, one of them would, out of nowhere, sucker punch this individual as hard as they could in the stomach. And see, it was for their protection. They wanted to identify spies and that kind of thing. Because what they quickly found out is that when you are hit that hard unexpectedly, you instinctively respond in your native tongue. So for them, it was a protection factor. For us, I think it's very revealing. No matter how good you are at hiding things, at some point, life is going to hit you and reveal your true character. It's going to reveal who you are, and a lot of times that's going to come out of your mouth. Now, I have to be perfectly honest with you. My wife's not here this service, so I was honest last service. I'll be honest again this service. Is something I struggle with a lot, especially in the last couple weeks. I've just been frustrated. I've been really busy with some things. And I've lost focus, and things have come up, and I have slipped and said things and talked about things I shouldn't have. And this was like a real gut check for me writing this. I had to walk away from my computer, talk to people, ask for forgiveness from God and from them, and really do a heart check. Because that's how easy it is to just slide into that. And the reality is, and God says that it will reveal what's inside. The second thing, and this is this is a lot. In Galatians, Paul talks, Galatians 5, 19 through 21. Just stay with me. I don't think it's going to be up here on the screen. It says, now the works of the flesh are evident: sexual immorality, impurity, and sensuality. Now, if we stop right there, you guys are like, most of us are doing pretty well. We can feel good about ourselves. But if you keep going, you get idolatry, sorcery, strife, jealousy, anger, rivalry, dissension, division, envy, drunkenness, and things like these. That's where I was coming from when I said the symptoms are wide-ranging. And a lot of it falls under this category, this idea of self-control. If you are unable to demonstrate self-control, I would say that's a big red flag. In whatever it may be. The things that you're addicted to are an indicator of a red flag. And that's why I'm saying the list goes on, and the symptoms are vast, and we could spend tons of time talking about it. It goes back to when Jesus talks to the Pharisees and says, you clean the outside of the cup, but not the inside. And Jesus is saying, hey, let the exterior be clean because it reflects a clean interior. There's just so much there, so much to that. And so, I'm not sure we can ever really fully become stain-proof. But I think that's okay. Because I believe we all simply lead stained lives. And so that's going to be your third point this morning, stained lives. Because when we talk about this verse, when we mention these things, we stop where James says, remain unstained. And that's where we want to have a conversation. But I think we have to finish the verse because I think the source of the stain is what's more important than the stain itself. It says, remain unstained by the world. See, the source makes all the difference. Because the truth is, like I said, we're all stained one way or the other. The difference is some stains accentuate and bring out the natural beauty of an item while protecting, and the others ruin. There's a big difference in those two stains. I love woodwork. If I had free time, that would probably be one of my hobbies. And I remember my dad and I, we built some furniture for our house. And I remember my favorite part of all of that is when the stain is applied. Because you build this item out of wood, and it looks pretty. It looks awesome. But you can take a stain and you can make it look so much more. And at the same time, you're protecting what you've built. And I think the same is true in our lives. Let's just call it like a jar of Jesus stain. Now, you can't buy this at Ace, but once you're saved, I believe that's applied to your soul. That's that new creation that the Bible speaks of. It's that blank slate we're seeking. And here's the thing. See, we built a really big deck when I was a kid. I was only old enough to be the gopher. Some of you guys know what that's like. Just go for this and go for that. I remember my dad finishing it up, and he stained the deck. And it looked awesome. It was cool. And that was the end of it, right? Well, no, because twice a year, my dad had to go out and bleach clean the deck and restain it. And anybody who has wood, anything outside can attest to that. If you got a wood fence, if you have a wooden deck, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of maintenance to keep them nice and to keep them safe and structurally sound. And so I think the lesson for not only our homes, but our lives is you can apply the stain, but unless you maintain, the world will cause rot. So it's not a one-time application. And it's cool because in Greek, it's really frustrating, actually. It's not cool. In Greek, they put random endings, what appear to be random, on the end of words, and it completely changes what the word means and how it's said. And the Greek word here with relationship to stained is amiantos. So now you can go tell people you know Greek and you're super intelligent. But the TOS on the end is a tense of the word. And if we translated that literally, the verse would read, keep on keeping yourself unstained. Even the Greek said, hey, this is a process. This is one of those things that's going to take a lot of work. It's never done. If you want it to look and act and be the way it's supposed to, you've got to maintain it. You've got to work at it. And so we've got this initial coat of our Jesus stain, right? So how do we maintain it? Like ultimately that's the question. If our lives, if this is the thing that really helps us to see the symptoms and helps keep us from where we've seen our culture and our world and our church and our own lives go, how do we do that? What's the maintenance look like? And again, there's a lot of things that could fall under these categories, but I picked out 3 that I feel like are good starter spots. That if you're accomplished at this, you can still get better at it. But if you're not so sure, then it's a good place to start. And the first of those is to live obediently. We are not good at obedient. We're just not. I mean, think about those of you who have kids. You don't have to teach your kids not to listen. You got to teach them to listen. And it's a process. I mean, day in, day out. That's why parents get gray hair. Y'all all know that, right? It's kids. But we're the same way with God. He's saying, hey, do this, do it now, do it this way. And we're like, nah, I think I'll do it my way. And so the first step here is to do things God's way, universally. I know this might be a shocker to some people, but God actually does dictate a lot of things and a lot of ways to handle things in your life. Finances, sex, marriage, kids, etc. Fill in the blank. He says a lot about a lot of it. That happens when you create it. You typically know the best way it operates. And the chances are that if you choose this in your life, it's going to cause some hard decisions. And I want to say the reality of that is probably because they're going to come into direct conflict with stains that are already in your heart, with other decisions that you've already made. And obviously, I think we hit it earlier, but to live obediently, you have to know what God says about things. You have to know the truth. Just because somebody presents an argument that is well-versed in support of pro-choice doesn't mean you automatically become pro-choice, because you know that stands contrary to what the Bible says about when babies are conceived and the sanctity of life. See, if you don't know that, how are you going to live that? Or you don't all of a sudden advocate for homosexual marriage because somebody comes up and takes the world's already distorted view of love and manages to make it sound nice when applied to same-sex marriages. You know that to live obediently, God says that homosexual relationships is a direct result of sin in our world. And while I love those people, I don't love their sin. See how that makes a big difference? You have to know what's true to live obediently. So, I mean, we're even taking care of some other things in this process. And the second guideline I would recommend, which is appropriate considering the holiday we just had, is to live thankfully. You know, I did this activity with our students, I think it was 2 weeks ago. We did a series on Thanksgiving and exploring thankfulness. And I asked them, I said, okay, if you were to only be able to keep, so if you lost anything that you did not thank God for today, what would you have sitting here right now? If you only had the things that you had thanked God for today, what would you have? And it's bad because I knew this was coming in the message and I didn't even do it this morning. But we're not thankful. We're not a grateful people. We're a greedy people. Because corporate America says that's how you get ahead. That you should always have something newer, something nicer. We don't know what it's like to live with thankfulness. And yet the Bible is very clear. Those people who live thankfully are often the best stewards. And the people who are the best stewards, the best caretaker of what God has given them, He gives them more. So live thankfully. Appreciate what you have. Be good stewards of what you have. You all have something that you can use to bless someone else. And finally, I would say, live it fully. With 2 L's. That's my mistake, not the tech team, sorry. Live it fully. Throughout the Bible, God is often less concerned with how someone starts and more concerned with how someone finishes. Finish well. It's less concerning where you are today. I think Perry Noble says it's okay to not be okay. It's not okay to stay that way. Finish well. Right? I hope that each of us at the end of our lives, we can be like Paul and say, I have run the race to the full. I hope that we all hear, well done, good and faithful servant. Show some persistence. It's a marathon, not a sprint. You're going to apply these things, and it's going to be difficult. It's going to be hard. Demonstrate some persistence. Finish well. Understand and learn the definition of maturity from a Christian perspective, and make that your focus. Stop being a Sunday-only Christian, because that's exhausting. Live it fully. So, as we close, I think we realize that stains from the world are they're almost inevitable. But the good news is that we have a source of a different stain that can help protect us from that. And so I want to encourage you to go through and to apply these things, to try and live obediently. And you know what? If you say, but I don't know what's true, well, get in a life group. That's what they're there for, to help you learn what is true. And you're saying, but I know what's true, but I'm just so bombarded at work. And well, get in a life group. They're there to reinforce what you already know is true. It's not as difficult as we make it. Decide that you're going to be thankful for a day. Then do it the next day. It'll be amazing how quickly that will become a part of who you are. And when those two things begin to line up, you'll find it much easier to live it fully, to finish well. I want to encourage you not only to just accept Christ as a protectant stain, as a fire insurance, as people used to say. I want to encourage you to work to maintain it. I want you to equip yourself with a barrier that really influences the world to roll off of you. I want to recommend this morning that as you apply these steps, that you're going to engage and begin to understand true religion as a byproduct of this relationship.